My name is Andrew Nikiforuk, and I'm the author of the best-selling book Tar Sands, Dirty Oil and the Future of a Continent. Most North Americans don't know it, but Canada replaced Saudi Arabia as the #1 supplier of oil to the United States nearly a decade ago. The U.S. now imports more than 20% of its oil from Canada, and more than half of that comes from the tar sands, the world's largest energy project. The sands are really giant deposits of bitumen, a very heavy hydrocarbon. Bitumen, for example, will not move through a pipeline unless diluted with light oil. These large reserves, second only in size to oil deposits in Saudi Arabia, lie under a forest the size of Florida. Much of the U.S. Midwest now runs on bitumen or synthetic crude exported from the tar sands. Although this unconventional hydrocarbon has lessened U.S. dependence on bloody oil from the Middle East, it is not a secure, cheap, or sustainable replacement for light conventional oil. Even industry recognizes bitumen as an ugly resource that spells the end of business as usual. The French company Total calls bitumen extreme, while Norway's Statoil describes it as difficult. Others call it dirty oil, and for good reason. Locked in sand and clay, Canada's bitumen takes 20 times more capital and 3 times more water, energy, and carbon to produce than conventional oil. 20% of Canada's bitumen can be dug up in large, open-pit mines the size of small cities. It takes 2 tons of sand to make 1 barrel of bitumen. As a consequence, oil companies truck enough dirt every other day to top up Yankee Stadium. Since the 1970s, the tar sands industry has moved enough soil to build 7 Panama canals. All of this brute force consumes enormous amounts of energy. On average, the mining industry spends 1 barrel of oil, or energy equivalent, to produce 5 barrels of bitumen. The global average, however, remains a return of 1 barrel of oil to 20. Diminishing energy returns mark bitumen as an extreme resource that cannot solve the global energy crisis. The majority of Canada's bitumen deposits lie way too deep to be mined. They must be steamed out of the ground with a crude technology called steam-assisted gravity drainage. This method converts an average of 3 barrels of groundwater into steam, which is then injected into the ground to melt but 1 barrel of bitumen. To date, the Canadian government has not properly mapped groundwater supplies in the Athabasca region. In 2009, the Council of Canadian Academies reported that groundwater withdrawals in the forest are not sustainable. On the surface, the steam plants look like an extreme oil play with lots of roads, seismic lines, and well pads. This fragmentation industrializes the forest over time. As currently designed, the steam plants could destroy 80% of the wildlife in the region, including woodland caribou and the nesting habitat for millions of boreal songbirds. Both the mining and steam industry have industrialized 1.6 million hectares of forest. That's 20 Calgarys, 40 Denvers, or 17 Berlins. Industry and government leaders call the sacrifice insignificant. The tar sands lie in the Mackenzie River Basin, the world's 3rd largest watershed. This area protects 1/6 of Canada's fresh water supply. But it takes 12 barrels of fresh water to process 1 barrel of bitumen. Industrial withdrawals of water from the Athabasca River now threaten the river's health during low winter flows. Approximately 90% of the water withdrawn from the river ends up in tailings ponds, large impoundments of mining waste. These dikes are among the world's largest dams and occupy an area the size of Staten Island. Many can be seen from outer space. Government has allowed industry to store 6 billion barrels of toxic sludge in the region. That's enough waste to fill a 10 by 10 meter canal that stretches across the 49th parallel or the U.S.-Canadian border. These impoundments represent a $20 billion liability for investors. The tar sands industry runs largely on natural gas. The industry consumes 20% of Canada's natural gas demand every year. That means it uses enough blue flame every day to heat 6 million Canadian homes. A report by the Canadian Parliament calculates that it would take 20 nuclear reactors to replace current natural gas consumption in the tar sands by 2015.